don't believe she knows you like I do. Your temperamental moody side, the one you always try to hide from me. But I know when you have something on your mind, you've been trying to tell me for the longest time. But before you break my heart in two, there's something I've been trying to say to you. But the words get in the way. There's so much I have to say, but it's locked deep inside. And if you look in my eyes, we might fall in love again. I won't even start to cry before we say goodbye. I'm trying to say I love you, but the words get in the way. Your heart has always been an open door, but baby, I don't even know you anymore. And besides the fact it's hurting me, I know the time has come to set you free. But the words get in the way. There's so much I have to say.
Hi, my name's Jonna Kuntz, and I'd like to welcome everybody to Voices on the Wind. Tonight I'm real excited to have a special guest.
Hi, my name is Heidi, and we're here to explore metaphysical and holistic concepts. We're taping at Missoula Community Access Television, and we are here today with Alexandra Burt talking about the continuum concept, a continuation of what we talked about last week. And it's an idea that was originally brought to the public by Jean Liedloff in her book, The Continuum Concept, here. And Alexandra and I have been talking about some of the suggestions that Jean makes from her experience in Venezuela in the jungle with a tribe, the Yaquana tribe in Venezuela, and how they raise their children. And part of the concept, a big part of the concept, has to do with holding the child from birth until the child reaches a mobility stage, which is usually around 8 months old, and what this does to our emotional well-being throughout our lives. So thanks for being back with us.
Thank you.
And since we've had that last show, I've had some questions come up from people, and I guess I'll hit you with one of the tougher ones.
Okay.
One of the fellows that watched it said, it's just too pure. It's just too pure. Meaning partly that gets rid of most of Western culture, the angst that we're all brought up to believe is normal, the depression that so many people feel at a very young age and often throughout their lives. The Yaquana don't have any of these components to their culture.
No, they don't.
So how do you respond to that?
I respond to that. This question came up after Bodhi was born.
Okay.
And
Bodhi's your son?
Yes.
Okay.
And Bodhi's dad said, I don't want to do anything 100% it's too extreme. And I had to think about this for a while, and I thought, well, maybe he's right. Maybe he's right. So I did hold Bodhi a lot and carried him with me. There was no way I could really deal with a stroller in a foreign country anyway. So he was getting lots and lots of contact, and I was breastfeeding. But I did set him down when I was tired or whatever. And then he was what you would call a very colicky baby.
He was.
And I was pretty active in my pregnancy. You know, in fact, my due date, I had walked 7 miles. Fortunately, he was a couple weeks late. But so there was this real unrest with him, in spite of the fact that he was in a lot of contact, and he was sleeping with us.
Okay.
And Jerry and I, you know, we really wanted that. But something happened profound change happened at 3.5 months when I called Jean Liebhoff and told her what was going on, and I implemented the continuum concept 100%. And then when I thought about the whole, what is the continuum concept? Okay, it's fulfilling the expectations or the needs of an infant, which are pretty strict requirements early on. You
Right.
can't let them go without food and water and such for extended periods of time,
Right.
or you'll go deaf, for one thing. But looking at it from an evolutionary aspect, I thought, of course, it does seem extreme to us. It seems extreme, but given that this is the expectation of our ancestors and has been since as long as man goes back, you carry your young until they can move on their own like any other animal would. You know, keep contact, keep close. Then it made sense. I thought, well, you know, I couldn't put him down. A snake could come, a spider could come, a wolf, anything. And in this way, it was not such a purist, quote-unquote thing, but it seems like it to us because we're so far removed, and we're in this industrialized society where everything seems safe, and we feel like we're safe because we have police. But it's, you have to look at history in a different way. It's not 1,000 years or a few, it's long.
Hundreds of thousands of years.
Hundreds of thousands of years. And as Jean wrote in her book at one point, she says, quite recently, and then she says, that is 10,000 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
We started incorporating this separation with our young.
Yeah, and when that happened is anybody's guess. She thought perhaps when we weren't hunter-gatherers and became more agriculture. But then in the book she mentions a scene in which one of the Anshu, I think was the father's name, and he had built a little playpen. He spent the whole morning building a playpen and then put his son, who was just learning to walk, in the playpen. And it took minutes before the little boy realized he was trapped, and he started screaming. And the boy, the father, took him out, and he ran to his mother, and then he just took an axe and chopped the whole thing up.
The child did? Or the father did?
The father
Oh,
did.
okay.
So all his efforts were nothing, but he was not going to go against his continuum. You know, that is that instinct that we have to care for our young.
And can you talk a little bit about, Jean goes into quite a bit in the book about biological expectations.
Yeah, well, the biological expectations would be, for instance, we're adapted to air when we come out of the room. There's a lot of changes. So we've adapted to air. We have waterproof skin, the light for our eyes, the sound for our ears, and we're even prepared for shocks. And part of the expectation, of course, would be to continue to hear the mother's heartbeat and to have this contact. At one point she says, you nourish the body with food, you nourish the soul with touch, or cuddles, I think she says. But it's this expectation that we have, and knowing somehow instinctually when we're out of the womb that we're not in contact, we are prey for anything.
Right.
And you've heard of you know, stories of pet snakes that attack infants or dogs that attack infants, and so it can happen even in our highly industrialized society today, but nothing like it would if we were in the jungle or, you know, out of this quote-unquote safety that we've built up around us. And we've simply, it's not that we aren't getting the messages. The baby gives us the messages all the time.
Right.
You know, that the baby cries, but we'll just ignore it. You know, one doctor said, well, he needs to exercise his lungs.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. Or, well, if the baby has been changed and the baby's been fed, it's not thirsty, you know, it's clearly not in pain, it's okay. But the baby is crying for a reason, and it goes to the mother's heart. But she has been trained out of it, trained out of listening to instincts, and there's about 20% at the time that this was written, Jean, looks at this study and writes about it, about 20% of the mothers that are incapable of actually loving their children. There's no mother instincts. Therefore, it's considered normal not to have mother instincts. But in a society where we've been so out of the continuum for so long, it's not surprising. Actually, I'm not surprised it's even more. Of course, that was 1975. It might be more now. But so these signals are always being given to us, but we short-circuit it through the intellect, and we don't allow our feeling nature in a way to nurture the baby through touch, which is all the baby is telling us, really.
My immediate response, going back a little bit to the exercising the lungs, is it's really comical because, you know, it sort of makes you hyperventilate when you're that panicked and screaming. I don't know what kind of exercise it is, but then we end up in our adulthood taking classes to learn how to breathe.
Yeah.
So that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
And going further back, now the strollers in Europe, you can't use those as easily because of cobblestones, or?
Well, I was in and out of buses,
Ah, okay.
and there's a lot of curbs. It's crowded. It's dusty. In Milan, at that time we were there, there was a lot of kidnapping, and I didn't feel like I just wanted to deal with the contraption of a stroller. It was a lot easier to have a sling that I could stick in my pocket and tie on when I need it.
So another urban danger to protect your kids
Yeah,
from.
it was just so much easier, and Bodhi then is eye level,
Mhm.
and it's I think probably more exciting for him.
Mhm.
And I never had a stroller except once. I rented one when I was in a little bit of pain, and it ended up Bodhi just wanted to stroll it, and we never even used it. But I was always going to do the continuum. It was just to what degree.
Right.
And that's when that purist question that you asked fits so well with my initial experience, because, you know, I'm a pioneer in this. I don't have any American moms who I can look at or call for help. What do you do here? And Jean's experience of it was with the jungle, and they're in a communal environment, and so that was also very different. I had to experiment a lot on my own, but it's been well worth it.
And so, getting to your own experience, we went over this a little bit in the first show. Bodhi was colicky, and you called Jean, and you gave up
Yeah.
the compromise?
I gave up the compromise. I said, okay, I'm implementing this 100%. Well, she had told me to carry him all the time, and that day, and I was staying with my parents at that time, visiting them before I was going to be flying off to Rome to meet Jerry, and my parents were willing, which was pretty nice, and it was one day that there was such a difference. He was smiling, no crying, and I thought, wow, well, maybe it's something else, you know, maybe he's just in a good mood or some fluke. And then it just continued and continued. And we have this idea that babies will cry and cry and cry, and, you know, that's just their nature.
Right.
And it's not that they don't, but, you know, Bodhi would go 5, 6, 7 days, no crying at all, none. You'd hear these cooing little sounds and whatnot, getting ready to explore language, but not this of something not being right. And then there was something that came up later as Bodhi got bigger that I wanted to mention, because if mothers read the book and they decide to carry their young until they crawl, this might come up, that I was very active in my pregnancy physically, and the tendency is for this experience out of the womb, once the child's out of the womb, to continue to some degree. And so if you're just going to sit with a baby that was used to a lot of activity in utero, he's not going to be as content as if you walk around and move around. So the house was very clean. My parents' house was very clean. And, you know, we watered and gardened and did all the shopping, everything on my back. And then when we got to Rome, Jerry was so amazed at how this is a different baby. He's not colicky at all. I mean, all the doctors said to do this and give him bifidus and blah, 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 and give him Tylenol. And he couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
None of us could. My parents couldn't either. Of course, Jean knew. because she'd seen it, and she'd lived with the Indians. She took 5 expeditions, and the last expedition she lived with them for 2 years. But there was a big leap of faith on my part. I had to trust that it would work, and it did.
Now, just for the practical stuff, this means that you didn't lay down in bed until you were ready to sleep. He would sleep in the sling?
Yeah. He was in and out of sleep all the time. He would sleep. I'll never forget this time. It was so funny. We were in Rome, which is a very active city, and there were sirens going by, and he was sleeping through all the sirens. And the woman, Sophia, who was with me, thought it was just so adorable. She wanted to take a picture, and she went click, and Bodhi woke up. You don't know what they'll respond to, but yeah, he's in and out of sleep kind of all day long. But I did notice that he slept more through the night once I was carrying him. I think because he was just getting a lot more stimulus, and he was having to hang on and use his whole system in such a more active way, and especially if I'm moving. And that's why children that are carried so much, and particularly if they're carried all the time, they develop at a very rapid pace. And it's pretty much a given, from all the scientific studies that have been done, that children will grow more and be eons beyond, a quote-unquote civilized baby. I mean, I knew Bodhi was right-handed. He was months old, like 6, 7 months old, because I'd carry him in a sling here, and rather than reaching with his left hand for food or something, he'd reach with his right. Yeah. So, and I tried to alternate, because I'm right-handed, with the left, and he would even reach around like this. And
with his
now,
right hand.
yeah, and we're told, oh, well, you don't know if a child's right or left-handed. It's normal if it's 3, But a baby will start to crawl at 6 to 8 months. So really what you're putting in time for 6 or 8 months, and then you've really got a lot more freedom, because the baby's so secure. He's had that in-arms phase, and he won't cry to be picked up, and cry for this, and cry for that, and beg for attention, and beg for, I don't want that food, and I don't want this, and give me what I want. Because he never got what he wants, but it's nonverbal and can't tell you. And of course, if you've not been exposed to the principles, you're not going to know, and it's highly frustrating for everybody. The mother too. And in doing the continuum, it's also healing for, I think, the mother, because she comes into her own maternal instincts, and in this way, it's just so beautiful to know that what you're doing is right. And even when you have a whole society against you, it doesn't matter, because you feel the rightness of it. And when your child is smiling so much, and not crying, but perfectly healthy. Bodhi was 30 pounds before he was a year old, which some people could say, well, that's genetic, blah, 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 blah. But we keep making these excuses. And when are we going to give up the excuses and say, hey, we are off track. It is not normal for babies to scream and scream and scream.
Just as a mom, I know women are going to be still thinking about the practical stuff. So how much of the day did you have him in your arms or lying next to you, and how much was he in the sling?
It depended on what I was doing. Now, when we were doing Feldenkrais trainings kind of around the world.
And that's body work, type of body work?
Yeah, kind of learning how to learn.
Okay.
So it fit right in hand, hand in hand. And it seemed that there was often somebody who wanted to hold Bodhi, because he liked to be held, and he just would form, right? Which is another difference between a baby that's been held a lot. They're easy to hold, but the body tonus is very different. It's extremely soft, and they're pliable. They can get in a variety of positions. So I'd have somebody hold him while I would lie on the floor for an hour, and if I didn't have that, and sometimes that would be the case, actually often it would be the case, because the training programs were sometimes not always pleasant places to be too, but at that time in my life. But see, walking,
he wouldn't cry
groceries.
when he was out of your arms for an hour.
No.
He wouldn't cry for mama and
Never.
Okay. That's an interesting difference too.
No.
Okay.
At 2, bye Bodie, bye Mom, bye Dad.
At 2, he was very independent.
Yeah, but you know, having a youngster in a training program where people are paying a lot of money to get an education, I had to be very sensitive to their needs too.
Right.
That they might not want a baby crawling around and things like that. So we did a lot of sightseeing together. We went to all kinds of museums and art museums, and he, you know, you think about how could you bring a toddler to, you know, the Louvre or the British Museum or whatever, but he loved it. He loved it. He was not a problem. There was just, he was good company. And the Romans really like babies, but for some reason there aren't a lot out. So he got a lot of attention, which sometimes I didn't like, but because it was just so much. He was blonde and tan and plump and cute. And I couldn't change his diaper without everybody gathering around. But I could do those things, which are quite, quote unquote, civilized. And if I needed a rest, I would sit down and I would, you know, look at Monet for half an hour, and he'd, you know, suck on his hand or pull on the sling this way to look around. But it wasn't awkward. And then if he was feeling the need to move, well, then fine. I'd get up and walk around, and then he was appeased. But they are used, of course, biologically come from hunter-gatherer kind of environment. They'd be used to a fair amount of activity. But if in the womb you weren't moving a lot, it's not such an issue. It's more of an issue when they get older, that you're involved in more task-oriented things like gardening or even painting, music playing. And I played the guitar with him on my back, not a lot, and he would sleep through a variety of sounds and situations that surprised us all. And then eating out to dinner, no problem at all. He just sat on the lap. I can't really, I'm trying to think of a situation where it was a problem. We went to dance concerts. I had danced before he was born, and he, you know, you could see people thinking, oh, you know, why is she bringing this baby? But by the end, they were smiling, and, you know, it wasn't any problem. He sat right up for Kurt Yost's green table. And these were all experiments for me. I hadn't seen done, but...
You don't see moms do this.
Yeah, but there was really no problem. He'd had enough movement during the day that by the time we sat down to watch a dance concert for 2.5 or 3 hours, it wasn't a problem. And if it would have been, I would have left for the respect of the people.
Right. And what age was he for all of this?
Let's see, from 3 months, 3.5 months where he was full continuum, and I think the last, you know, really big trip we took, he was about 3.5 years old.
So all what people consider the problem years, the years when kids are uncontrollable and you know, do unexpected things, he was totally working with you.
The infancy and toddlerhood, in my opinion, is the easiest stage. Up to about 5, maybe 6, because then, you know, it's the natural course for the child, and Bodhi's a boy, so he'll need to imitate his dad, and then he was begging to go to school, to be like other children. So then there's a whole other input.
You had wanted to homeschool?
Yeah, he was homeschooled till he was just before his 7th birthday. And he was begging to go to school so much, I thought, okay, that's time. He's letting me know. But that's when it gets more difficult, because you're not of like-minded people, and you're not getting support in a way. And we, in our culture, we have, you know, junk food and real food and TV and not TV. And I was surprised this year, he was used to TV and whatnot where he had lived more than, you know, my household. And in 9.5 months, he asked to watch the TV once when he was sick. We watched for about 15 minutes and laughed and turned it off. Make a million told me I needed to go on. And then twice when his friends spent the night, he asked to watch a video. And it's not that TV's so bad, but at the developmental stages, it's more what it takes the place of. And he was so much happier outside with his buddies that it didn't create an issue. And if I saw on a rainy day that it could become an issue, or for whatever reason, I would maybe start an activity in the kitchen without, letting him know, getting out the wick and the wax, and so he'd make candles for an hour or two, and that would just kind of solve the problem. But the issue with food is still there. It's not easy.
What's the issue?
Well,
with food?
because in the iguana, in the jungle, it's a limited amount of food.
Variety-wise.
Yeah,
Okay.
and there is no sugar, and well, all my friends get candy, and they always get pizza and that kind of thing. But still, the most important thing is really to meet these evolutionary expectations and needs that we have for the infant, and not focus on the child, because the human species could not have survived if we focused on the child. Nor could the human species have survived if toddlers and children were suicidal.
Right.
And it's a very deep, what would you call it, principle maybe, that we tend to behave according to what's expected of us. So now naturally children want to stay close to their moms. I mean, I see Sienna with you. You go to she's right there.
Right.
She wouldn't dream of straying from you too far.
No.
But you go to the parks and you see children lost all over, and the grocery stores they're lost, and that's a non-continuum way of living.
I was just thinking, going back to the term continuum concept, I came up with 3 ideas for me about what that means. There's the continuation of our biological heritage. There's the continuation of contact beyond the womb, continual contact beyond the womb. And then there's also the continuation of your own work and activities without break or interruption.
Right.
So those 3 things that make this term make sense to me. Was Jean thinking of all of these things or more? Or?
She was thinking of all of those things. I think the main thing that struck her was, it wasn't until her 4th expedition she noticed that they didn't bicker,
Right.
and that there weren't the kinds of problems between people or husbands or wives.
And the joy.
But yeah, and that they laughed a lot, and things that we get really miffed at. And these were anomalies she couldn't figure out. But after the 4th expedition, she thought of this in evolutionary terms.
Okay.
And then it clicked in. Oh, okay, you carry the young. They get that in-arms, passive sort of euphoria where nothing is expected of them. They don't have to, how mothers say, what do you want, what do you want, what do you want? It's, the adult knows, they're the authority figure, they know what's best for the child. And this makes the child feel very secure.
Right.
Because they know they can't care for themselves. And they know the adult should know what's best. But if you turn it around and say, well, what do you want Mommy to do? What do you mean?
Right.
Mommy, you're supposed to know what to do.
Yeah.
Or what do you want to eat? What do you want now? Yeah. So it is you're very accurate in this continuation of the in-arms phase, that is the contact until they can ambulate on their own, which I have to reiterate again, that's what the other, look at the primates, and Jane Goodall talks about this too. She learned more from the chimpanzees than she did from her fellow humans, because they weren't out of touch with the instincts.
Right.
So keeping that going, trusting the child's instincts, not to jump over a cliff or jump out a window when they get closer, to fall off a precipice, or drown himself in a pool. And the expectations, you're expecting the child to be social, not antisocial. Well, you will create an antisocial being if they're being deprived of their evolutionary needs. That will happen. But given that, because we're still in the process, we can carry a child until they crawl and still have problems because we're expecting something else.
Right.
And so you can take this as far as you want, and for some reason I was driven to just take it as far as I could, and part of it were those early times in consulting with Jean, when I saw things change in a day and in an hour.
Mm-hmm.
The teething issue didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
Teething? I thought, why are mothers complaining about teething? I don't even remember when Bodhi teethed except once, and he was drooling and drooling, and it happened that it was their doctor friend who was over there, and he said, oh, your son's going to get a tooth. And I said, oh, that's why he's drooling so much. Duh. Well, I didn't consult doctors or go to anybody
Mm-hmm.
or read Dr. Spock or anything after I'd read the Continuum. And
I can just hear some moms and dads at home going, she was lucky.
yeah.
She was
Yeah.
just lucky. She's that 1 in a million whose baby didn't have the teething
Uh-huh.
symptoms.
Well, I guess I was pretty lucky all the way through. No terrible 2s, no terrible 3s, no terrible 4s. But
But you did have it before you did the Continuum.
I did.
You had
We
a
had
colic?
enormous problems.
Yeah.
He was not content. It was just this, and it went straight to my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I was carrying him to some degree. But I think I gave birth to a demanding baby because of my extreme, active lifestyle, both during pregnancy, and then trying to maintain things after,
Right.
through time zones and whatnot.
You may have the only child on the planet with no jet lag, too.
I
Since he
don't
got
know.
it so young.
I don't know. We'll see. This is the first time now since he's been 3.5 or 4, and he's traveling with his dad this summer, and they're going to go back to Rome and New Zealand and little Germany, and we'll see how he does.
Now, a 10-year-old in the Aquana culture, that's probably normal to go on a hunting trip with Dad
Yeah.
at 10.
At 5 or 6, now I was just reading about this boy in the Continuum concept. I think his name was Wadidi, and the chief had adopted him when the father had died, and this child was part of the tribe but had apparently been removed from the tribe for a little while.
Like missionaries or
Yeah,
something? Okay.
exactly. It was missionaries, and he was in a missionary hospital, so he wasn't functioning like the other kids. And it's funny, when he went to hit the other kids, this is a little off the subject, but the Yaquana children they looked at it like a tree branch hit them. They didn't take offense or anything. But anyway, the father left it open to the child, I'm going hunting, or come with me or not.
Right.
There's no coaxing or whatever. And this is another part of the Continuum. It's kind of these little layers.
Mm-hmm.
But while we're here, I'll say this, is you're not imposing your will on the child. The child will, for instance, with work, will help when he's ready to help. And she discusses all this of a 2-year-old grating the cassava, and after a few minutes the grater and the cassava drops and the 2-year-old runs away, and no big deal, at the right time when she's ready to help, she'll help. When the boy is ready to go hunting, he'll go hunting. The choice is always his.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we have is a society in which the main core of the society is extremely stable, and the doings of the sort of detailed behaviors of what people choose to do are much more liberal,
Okay.
because they have this strong, stable base. And then the requirements at birth are highly strict. Like the man who built the playpen, he saw it didn't work, chop it up, forget it.
Yeah.
So this is what, getting back, just listening to the instincts. And Jean talked about how you'll see children with their mothers who are fairly continuum, in the sense that the child is always on the mother's side. There's no back and forth, there's no struggle, or you can't do this, you can't.
Right.
That, and they have listened to their instincts. So it can all be in varying degrees. And I would say that it may sound terrible, but experiment. If you're one of those mothers who says, I gotta sleep through the night,
Mm-hmm.
my child's gonna have to scream it through.
Right.
Lie down and listen. Listen to your instincts. When you lie down and you're hearing the child scream, what's your impulse to do? What does your kinesiology say to do? And if you really listen, I think you'll find to pick up a child, to respond to the cries.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a pretty strong instinct, I think, in most people. Even dads, if they would do the same thing.
Yeah. But we short circuit it through the intellect. Well, I have to sleep. He's going to have to sleep through the night. So let him cry. Or maybe it's not with sleep. Well, I have to get this done. We have to make money or we're not going to survive. So therefore, the child is just going to have to suffer for the good of the whole family. Well, there is another alternative. These slings don't cost a lot. You can make one out of fabric. If
Like we
grandma
showed
or
last
grandpa
week.
or a little kid, Jean said that kids 6 and 7 years old, sometimes even younger, would be carrying, be in full charge of an infant.
Wow.
So
So they
let somebody else hold the baby, walk around, and they love it because their instincts aren't, they're not short-circuiting as quickly as we are with the intellect and rationalizing.
Yeah.
And look for solutions. That's what I would suggest to people. If you can't do it full on or you don't want to, you're thinking that I'm too much of a purist or Jean's too much of a purist, implement it in little ways and see if you can find, I think you'll find the difference quite quickly. And then just keep implementing it.
So we're going to take a short break now, and when we get back, I want to talk a little bit about this strong base from which it seems to me that people can be more individualistic and freer than anything we can imagine,
Yeah.
as opposed to clone, behavior.
Yeah.
And also the whole thing about physical development. How do they learn to crawl if they're close to the body? So
Yeah.
we'll get back to all of this in just a short time, and we'll take this short break. And please stay with us. This is one of my favorite topics. I hope you like it too. Hi, we're back here to talk to Alexandra Burt, and before we do that, I wanted to thank Rainbow Zen for the beautiful outfit this evening. They're at 113 West Main Street, and they've been providing a lot of the wardrobe for the show. And to get in contact with Alexandra, her phone number is 327-0790. It's 327-0790, and I'm sure you all have lots of questions for her. Feel free to call her. And for anyone on the show, the Heidi Show, anyone on the crew, it's 829-9162. And if you'd like to contact anyone at MCAT for your own video projects or anything else, the number is 542-MCAT, 542-6228. And getting back with Alexandra. Now, a lot of parents are going to say, well, the only way my child has been able to learn how to crawl is by being out of my arms on the floor and practicing ambulation. So what happens when they're in arms?
Well, they must not have tried having a baby in a sling.
Okay.
Because, well, I think I had mentioned that the babies who are carried all the time grow at a rapid pace,
Right.
and are highly developed. Our babies look almost retarded, really, compared to them. Bodhi was considered super baby. I mean, I knew he wasn't. My genes are nothing special, but he was constantly having to adjust to my body movements. Say I'm in a kitchen, I reach up. He's going to go back, right? If he's back here,
Right.
I reach up. He's going to have to hang on to go back. Okay, I reach down for, I don't know, canned good, okay? He's going to come forward, so he has to grab on with his legs. If he's in a front sling here, and I'm doing dishes, he's going to have to move his little feet over, and either slap him over the counter here, over the sink, or just bring him all the way up to his chest in order to avoid, getting squished. If I'm gardening, which we did quite a bit of, I was surprised just how little I had to do to keep him sustained. He was always adjusting. And then once, well, let's see, I put him down, he must have been about 5 months. And he rolled, and because of course he'd been used to all the same kind of movements in the sling. And he rolled, and then there would be times when I would read, and I would sit down and have him just on my legs. So he would roll off and then grab back on with his hands and roll off and come back and roll off. So this happened even though he wasn't in the sling too, just maintaining contact.
Right.
And the arm's length away, I mean, there may be times for some unknown reason, I can't really think of when, but if you put the baby down, if you're still arm's length away, they're going to sense that and feel that. They're not getting the same stimulation, of course, if you do that. It's not as good for their neurological development and their nervous system and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But just that closeness will still allow you to do whatever it is you think you need to do without a baby in contact. But no, they learn to crawl. They learn very quickly, and she gives an example of this big pit that was dug about 5 feet deep, a mud pit.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a baby that was crawling, going straight toward the pit. And
Mm-hmm.
Jean, from a Western perspective, thought, oh no,
Right.
they don't know this baby's going to fall in. And
Mm-hmm.
the baby was rolling around, landing everywhere but in the pit, sometimes with the back behind the pit,
Mm-hmm.
not seemingly not paying any attention. And then she said she realized the baby was landing every place but in the 5-foot mud pit. And she said they had quite a rapid crawl,
Mm-hmm.
and they can. I remember.
What was her understanding of why the baby wasn't going in the pit?
Well, they trusted the baby's instincts.
Okay, so
They
they
know
weren't
babies aren't-
imposing fear and placing a taboo on the hole, or
No taboo on the hole. No taboo on the machetes that were thrown
Mhm.
in the hut. No, no taboo on the cliffs or precipices. And there were times when the mother would have to go to the garden, say, and she would, she grabbed the forearm
Mhm.
of the toddler, and then he had to pull his weight up to get onto her hip.
Oh, okay.
So that's pretty good gymnastics there. Doing that several times a day, you can imagine.
Mhm.
So, I lost my train of thought there.
The taboos and the agility.
Right, the trusting of the instincts
Mm.
and the agility.
Mhm.
That they didn't superimpose any expectations of fear. They expected the baby to cut himself, or they expected the baby to fall in the pit. And one thing that Jean had told me that's really important that I want to pass on, if you are doing this, you must respect yourself. That is, if you see your baby with a knife
Mhm.
and you have a fear that he could cut himself, like she'd said, that the deepest instincts we have is to uphold the expectations that are put upon us.
Okay.
So that's not safe for you or the baby.
Mhm.
And it's a process. I mean, we're not going to get there in 1 generation or 2 generations. It's going to take a while.
To get back in tune with their
Yeah,
instincts.
sure. It's going to take a little while. I've made all kinds of pathetic mistakes, but we're implementing as much as we can and still paying respect to the fact that we did not come from this history, and we might not be able to see our baby, looking over a cliff and not panic.
Right.
I was teaching a dance class, and it was up on the second or third floor in downtown Missoula, and Bodhi crawled up into a window and peered right out. It was a very hot July day. It was wide open. There was no screen. And I was comfortable with it, and apparently most people in the room were. They didn't say anything. And he was kind of playing around, and then he'd go look out the window and play around and look out the window. A woman came in late, and she saw Bodhi go to the window, and she started screaming.
Oh, no.
She said, you cannot, do this. Interrupted the whole class. We all were fine with it, smiling, having a good time dancing. And the funny thing that one of the other dancers noticed, who was helping me from time to time to implement the continuum, she said, did you notice how Bodhi, after that big scare got in him, how he would go to the window and look to see if he'd get a reaction, and then come back and look again and then come back? And he said he had a good time getting those responses.
And it really is the metaphor of the Adam and the Eve story. I mean, if the parents are the god or the goddess of the child, all you have to do is say no, and You're almost certain that the child's going to be going for it. I mean,
Yeah.
almost without a doubt.
Yeah.
You make that apple, and
Mhm.
they're going to want the apple.
Well, and there's a question that parents will ask, well, we live in a different society. We have chemicals, we have electricity, we have plugs, we have glass, blah, blah, blah. Well, the chemicals, they're right. I would childproof the chemicals, and we did. Mostly we tried not to have anything chemically around.
Right.
Anyway, but you don't want to be sucking on that green, what's that green cleaner? That's too strong.
We probably don't want to
Okay.
mention it anyway, but...
Simple green.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the chemicals, yeah. We used a few of these plastic plugs for the electrical outlets. And that was it. I think that was it. And we had a lot of, you'd call them vases and things like that. My mom had a lamp with all these, Victorian lamp with all these beads. And he just would take his hands like this, gently through the beads. Didn't pull on them. That's not his nature to destroy. He's had his need. He doesn't need to get attention. And he really liked to feel these beads on his fingers. And we would say gentle, so he knew what gentle was. And then that was it.
So you think a lot of the throwing things and, hitting mom and dad, slapping and stuff like that comes out of frustration?
Yeah, their emotional needs aren't met. They're emotionally deprived and physically deprived, and it continues. And it continues as long as we live.
And parents will grab out of kids' hands if they think it's an immediate danger. There's a grabbing as opposed to, give that to me, please, or
Right.
whatever.
So usually a child never gets a chance to even be responsible with something because there's such a fear in us that they take it away. So the children don't learn to negotiate with water, with knives, with machetes, with pitchforks, unless they come from farmers. You can't really protect a kid from all that farm equipment.
Right.
There's so much stuff. And they'll say, my grandpa, they were old farmers. Well, that's how they learn.
Right.
So in that case, yeah. Well, they had to survive. They worked very, very hard. And they were, like I said, if you take us back, what would we do to survive? We couldn't have catered to our children, and we couldn't have expected our children to be suicidal. We would not be here as a race. We would not be here as a race if we put our children down or our infants down.
Right.
Wouldn't happen. We would not be here as a race if everybody said, this is my child and that is your child. You have to take care of your child and I take care of my child. We wouldn't have survived.
And let's get to that part of the Aquana equation. Do they say, don't do that to my child?
No, they don't have any issues about that because the kids don't fight or hit. But they have, for instance, if an adult has lost their family to disease or whatever, they adopt adults into their family. Wadidi's father had died, and the chief adopted him.
Okay.
And obviously there was not too much issue about what was social and not social because Wadidi he was like a Western kind of raised baby in the sense that he screamed and cried and howled. He hit other children. Missionary hospital probably wasn't real continuum oriented.
Probably not.
So, and this chief, whose reputation is quote unquote on the line, adopted his friend's baby.
Okay.
So they make allowances for that so that there's never too much pressure on any one person where they would freak out and lose the continuum because of so much pressure, or where they would be driven to have to harm their baby. And in caring for each other's children, it helps take the load off. But Jean said the mother did do the main, caretaking. And her presence was, her unconditional love and presence was always there, even though she might not go goo goo gaga and say, do this, do that. There was no guiding of the child, because the guiding advances the child on one level, but then creates disadvantages in another area. So you always want the instincts of the child to make the choice of whether it's to help or to go hunting, whatever. And I've had to struggle with this a lot. You know, my son's taking violin lessons, or he was until he just left for the travel, and he really liked it initially, and then he said, you know, I'm really not enjoying this. He'd rather be outside with his friends. And I had played an instrument for 20-some years and practiced hours and just loved it, and it was really hard for me to see him not want to practice.
Right.
And what to do with that kind of thing.
And did you ask Jean about this? Because, you know, the usual thing, especially if the parents
Pay
are
the money
are looking ahead, they'll say, it'll pay off in the long run. Struggle through it, it'll pay off in the long run. Which is, struggle is not a Yukwana thing.
No.
They don't even use the word work, right?
They don't have a word for work.
Yeah.
Because work is play is work. There's no differentiation.
And the expectation would be, well, if you do this now, you'll be so happy with yourself in your 20s that you have this this talent.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we discussed it in a myriad of ways, and I asked him, I said, well, you probably enjoy playing the songs that you've already learned, and he said, yeah. And he'll hum Bach, and he'll hum, you know, Suzuki and the various songs, so I know that he must have enjoyed it if he's humming the tunes. He's
Right.
not humming Mary Had a Little Lamb anymore. And this structure is also very good for the brain and the development of the brain. So even if he doesn't go back to it, it's okay. He's learned.
Okay.
And
So you're not imposing. Again,
I'm
this is
okay
a
with
position of will.
yeah, I'm okay with it. And he doesn't allow himself to get Fs or whatever. He has, well, it's kind of like what my dad said when I was younger. I felt like they didn't care because they didn't look at my report cards. And I thought, gosh, they don't even care if I flunk or what kind of grades I have or anything. And so I asked them about it, and he said, well, we just felt that, you know, there's enough pressure on you. You know what you need to do to have grades, and if you're not resonating with the teacher or the subject's difficult and you get a C, well, so what? Well, the consequences of that were pretty good. I mean, they never paid us for grades, and we did quite well. I mean, what's the point of going against the joy of, there's all this incentive of giving candy for kids to read and doing this and that. Well, or you have to read so much. And Heidi defied that.
He did.
Yeah. But he, in the winter, it's cold and dark, he'd read till 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night, and then in the morning, be quiet for hours, and I knew he was reading. He'd read for hours and hours and hours, and it was not required of him. It was not on the list. It was something he enjoyed. So I would tell him, look, you know, it's not, you don't want to judge a book before you've finished. So if you can, sustain judgment, you know. And there are going to be things that you have to do in school that you don't really like. And that's, you know, part of the society that we live in. And I'm sorry that you don't enjoy it. But, you know, this is how we're living. And it doesn't bother me, because I know he loves to read.
And as far as his coping mechanisms with dealing with things that aren't as desirable, is he better able to cope than other kids?
Well, he doesn't throw tantrums.
He's been very much in on the decision-making process. He's the one who chose school, and
Well, with the homeschooling thing, yeah, I just felt that it was time. And he pretty much, we've talked a little bit about homeschooling, and he pretty much says, no, I'd rather go to school with my buddies, and that's fine too.
And that's another part of the continuum concept, is there is a whole tribe, there's a whole clan to rely upon. It's not a thing of isolation
Right.
and
Well,
the not doing the continuum concept impacts our entire society. It has to do with how we set everything up.
Yeah.
The reward system, the candy in schools to get kids to perform, and then all the way through adulthood and to death.
well,
So we can't really go into all of these ways that it's impacting us. But I wanted just to talk about how he's taken responsibility for the different choices. He's at an age where if he were in a tribal situation, he would, you know, he is at that age where He takes responsibility for the consequences,
Mhm,
for the
mhm,
decisions.
mhm. And he'll say, you know, my mom's the only one that has consequences,
Oh,
which I'm not sure how I feel about that. But those are the words he uses. He
Mhm.
knows that his particular actions are going to have particular outcomes,
Mhm.
and that's important for him to know. Yeah. He sets his own bedtime. I don't tell him when to go to bed. If he stays up till 11 o'clock, he knows he's going to be tired the next day.
right.
And I don't want this going back and forth and get to bed and brush your teeth and do this. I don't want it, you know. And he, actually, bedtime was never an issue until he went to school, and then he had to go to bed early. And he would even say, in fact, it was just a few nights ago, he said, no, I want to get to bed. He was playing with his friends. He said, I'll be home soon because I want to get to bed early tonight. So he makes that decision. And there are times when they're in a really good, you know, baseball game or soccer game, and I said, well, we're eating at 6 o'clock. And if you come in at 6 o'clock, join us, great. And if not, you know, dinner's going to be cold. I'm not going to do anything extra. He
Right.
knows that that's how it is. And if he wants a particular kind of food and snack or whatever, you know, he cooks it.
Mhm.
He cooks it. And if he wants his laundry done and I'm not ready to do a batch, he does it. You know, got this extra small load, and he'll take whatever's there, and yeah, and he's okay with it.
Mhm.
You know, there are times he said he has to take care of whatever cleanup needs to be done before he goes out to play, and there have been times when he said, "But Mom, that's what adults do. Adults are supposed to cook for kids and clean for kids and blah 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 blah," and it's hard for him to really get that. You know, we're not in a continuum society. He might not
Right.
see his friends, you know, assisting in an easy manner. And so this might be a little bit of a problem inside his brain, I don't know. But when I'm out in the yard, he'll pull out the lawnmower
Mhm.
of his own accord. He'll pull out the weed eater of his own accord. Occasionally I find him just watering of his own accord. I would think, looking back and raising him and knowing how helpful he was when he was younger, I thought that by the age of 10 he would have been doing tons more.
Yeah.
But now there's this big distinction between work and play.
Okay.
So, I don't know, ask me in 8 years when he's 18, I'll let you know. We're still working through that. But I do know that when a baby is carried in arms, they're bonding to something human.
Okay.
They're not bonding to something material. You see, this is important
All right.
because, extremely important, because when we have a society that's based on being bonded to something material, the security is in, you know, the rattles, the bottles, the whatever. Then it transmits. Then it's the toys or the videos or the whatever. And human relationships aren't as important. They didn't have that. So I think that what we could probably predict is for someone who's been raised, you know, we can't raise in the continuum in a society, but as much continuum as we can,
Right.
that their human relationships will be the most forwriting and important thing. The human relationships will be more important than a good deal. That because that's what he bonded to something human, or she. And that's what we want to look at as well. That we have this addiction to the car, the house, the diamonds, or the whatever material things. Why do you suppose? I mean, if we have a shopaholic, there's a name for it, where there's this addictive kind of personality that we've created to things that are physical, that are
Right.
inanimate. And it makes sense to me that if you bond to that from the time you're young to something inanimate and material things, that you'll need those material things for security. It's a very real thing. These people that have to have it, they have to have that for security. It's not some complete false greed, I don't believe. That is what maintains their equilibrium.
See, I never thought about it this way. I always thought about the emotional hole that we were trying to fill. But it makes so much sense. I mean, when you start thinking about it, we've got high chairs, car seats, cribs, strollers, rockers, swings,
Pacifiers.
pacifiers, So the container, first of all, we start out in these containers, these inanimate containers, and that, you know, develops right into a Cadillac eventually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice rockin' Cadillac. But yeah, and then all the toys and the goodies and all this, you're right. And there is a variation on this, which again is more like you were doing it before Bodhi was 3 months old, called attachment parenting, which has the family bed and as much sling as possible, but we still have the car seats. And very often, you know, part of the attachment parenting is when they're asleep, then do the vacuuming and then do the housework. Put them down, you know, use that quiet time for yourself to take a bath and nurture yourself and get all your chores done. So there's this actually very big difference.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I'm one of those persons who needs a lot of time to myself, even now. But I was surprised how much I felt that I was getting time alone, even because Bodhi would be so easy to be with as an infant, and because I had carried him inside of me all those months, he was still a part of me. So I would take a luxurious bath with bubbles or whatever, and he'd be an infant. And I felt like that was a kind of time out for myself, even though he would be with me.
Be
Yeah.
in the tub on your knees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And his dad took baths with him, and a lot of different activities that you think you could play Frisbee. I danced with Bodhi on my back for quite a long time. In fact, this might not sound so good, but we were in a foreign environment, and this was a summer we went to Rome, so he was 2.5, and you can't keep me from not moving to the drum. And it was a foreign enough environment that I felt like I couldn't just leave Bodhi. And I wasn't sure about the people there either. I didn't know them. So I put him in a sling, and I danced with him, and he was 2.5. He loved it. He really liked it, and then he fell asleep. You know, I can't move full out, but I can indicate still. I can get the rhythm. I'm still learning, and he's feeling that I'm learning and that I'm growing and that I'm really enjoying myself, and he's getting the rhythm. He's getting rhythm through my body. Yeah. So I teach dance, and so I see a lot of people, they don't have rhythm. It's very difficult just to get them to step on the count of 1 or to go up on the count of 1 and to reverse that. There's no...
And I mean, all different levels about this, about trusting body movement, which would be more, which would be easier, I think, with a continuum concept. Just the trust in general, the trust of being.
Yeah. And they tend to be quite cautious because they're responsible for their own actions.
And now I haven't been there, but it sounds to me, at least it's in very diminished amounts, if it exists at all. There isn't the anger, there isn't the angst, there isn't the depression, the emotional pain going on, and that just breeds, like I was saying, we were saying, most of the ills of society, or we're called the ills of society. So getting back into how we could help people try this out, what do you say to a single mom who's working? This is really common.
Well, if she's obliged to have daycare, I would request as strongly as I could that she carry the infant all the time.
When the baby's with her?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that when she comes home, that's the first thing she does. She carries the infant, she sleeps with the infant. And then as the toddler gets bigger, see, babies are out of the workplace because civilized babies are so difficult to be around.
Right.
When they're not difficult to be around, I don't think people would have a problem with them in the workplace. I really don't. And so if the baby is being carried and getting that in-arms phase and his instincts trusted and whatnot, and that the baby's feeling the intention of the mother, she might be able to make some compromises and bring the baby or the toddler with her. I would try it. And like I said, for me it was one day. And this was several times I tried it. Then I wasn't carrying him in his sleep. Then I carried him in his sleep. He stopped fighting sleep. So give yourself a chance. One day 6 hours is not really a lot of time out of your life when it's the emotional security of another person's entire life.
Right.
And I would try to really look at it like that. And I know that it's extremely difficult, you know, being on your own, you know, and I was away from Jerry, you know, for a month or two. I think the longest maybe was 3 months. And it's difficult, you know. And they don't have that kind of situation there.
In Venezuela.
Yeah, because they work as a commune. And I remember asking a neighbor if she could, the kids were already playing out in the yard, and Jerry was coming home late for some reason, and he's usually very scrupulous about time, and I had a class to make, and I thought at the latest it'd be about 10 minutes, and would she be comfortable if Bodie was there for 10 minutes until his dad came home, and she said no. And I thought, wow, you know, just 10 minutes of her time, it would have helped me so much. But there's no predicting, you know, the behavior of other people. So you do have to be prepared and hook up with other people who want to do this. Say, hey, you know, I have this book and I really want to do this. I think we could help each other. See, and the healing process comes when you're involved with it.
And let's talk about that. Has it helped your healing process?
I'm not sure. I still find myself censoring, always being careful of people's feelings, not to offend them, can't be too direct because they might get upset, and feel quite emotionally drained, I would say, from relationships, that it's still hard, like I just can't give enough for there to be real satisfaction. So I'm not sure, but at least there are some tools to rely on. And I feel that for sure the relationship that I have with Bodie has saved my life.
Really?
In a sense, yeah, because my frustration level's not real. What do I say? High. A child's cry, it just goes straight to my heart. So I don't know what I would have done if I couldn't have pacified those cries. And it did give me a tremendous amount of strength, just coming into your own motherhood and knowing that what you were doing was right, and discussing this, you know, with Jerry, and going through our childhood grow-ups and kind of what we missed out. There's becomes at least an understanding of what's going on, and I think that creates a patience with each other. But I do still feel overwhelmed by the fact that there's just no way I can really assist this person in the way that I would like at times with this these emotional needs that just seem endless.
So you're talking about adult relationships now,
Mhm.
and the harm we've inflicted upon each other in our normal child rearing
Kind of
lives.
accidentally, yeah. But yeah. And I do think it gives one a greater sense of at least compassion toward other beings. You see people that are alcoholics and addicts, you know, reaching for that state of euphoria that they never had. And even for me, just walking down the street has shifted my perspective.
And two of the things I notice, especially in America, I've traveled some in Europe, and it seems just more poignant here, is our lack of affection, our overall lack of affection, and our voyeurism. It's just, it's such a heightened level in this country. For instance, I was thinking about that when you were saying, you know, try to bring the baby or the infant, the toddler, to work. Well, if you're breastfeeding, that can be an immediate issue right there. And we're actually trying to put laws into place so moms can pump milk during breaks and things like this. It's pretty bizarre that we have to implement laws to be natural.
Yeah.
That's really strange to me.
Yeah.
And in
Wow.
some states and cities, there are laws against public breastfeeding,
Mm-hmm.
which again, and that all has to do with our voyeuristic behavior. Of course, I don't think there was any of this in the Aquana. They didn't even dress when Jean first got there.
Yeah, right. And Bodhi didn't want to wear clothes, and that caused a lot of problems.
Really?
He did not want to wear clothes unless it was cold,
Mm-hmm.
until he was about 3.
Yeah.
And finally, I was like, I didn't want to force clothes on him, but I won't forget on Halloween, he went to the door with candy, and he wasn't fully dressed, and the kids in their outfits said, "There's a naked boy in there!" Ah! And they, but I don't
Talk about coping mechanisms.
quite understand that strong reaction, but he sensed it,
Mhm.
and he was very compliant with, putting on something besides underwear.
Yeah, the peer pressure, that's one of what I think is our emotional needs. I don't know if you'd call it quite an expectation, but one of our main drives is to get along with other people.
It is.
We'll do almost anything
We
to
will.
do that. So it'd be wonderful to see more and more people try the continuum concept and get a whole group of people whose expectation is just to be natural and at peace with ourselves. I would love to see that.
Mhm.
And we are coming to the end of the hour, and
Oh.
I know, but we are going to do this again with a live audience, and we're going to have call-ins so people can ask you questions, and I have a feeling there are a bunch of them, and I have a feeling we've stirred up a lot of emotions with our conversations, and I really appreciate you for being here and sharing all your personal experience with us.
Well, I just have to say that going through all this again has been such joy to me, because it's not something I would have just done spontaneously, and doing the show forced me to go back and look more carefully and line things up. And I love it. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Alexandra.
January of this year, residents of New Guinea have been evacuated from that island because it's sinking. And it was the same in Atlantis. Pardon me. It was the same in Atlantis. They had warnings. And according to Casey, the survivors of Atlantis went to 3 main locations. One was in Mexico, ancient Mexico, and were the ancestors of the Maya. The other was ancient Egypt, and the survivors of Atlantis formed the foundations of the advanced civilization that built the Great Pyramid. And the third location that Casey names is China. Now, it is interesting that we know very little. There are large areas of China, the archaeology of China, that we don't know much about because it's a communist country. And during World War II, a pilot flying over China photographed pyramids. And there's been several recent articles written about those pyramids. At the present time, they are in what China calls a forbidden zone, which is probably a military zone. But foreigners are not allowed into it, so we have not been able to get into the area of China where there is, I believe there are 17 pyramids. One of them has the exact 52-degree angles of the Great Pyramid, but is much larger than the Great Pyramid. So we have a connection between pyramids in China, the pyramids in Egypt, and pyramids in Mexico. Now the pyramids in Mexico are step pyramids. They do not resemble the construction of the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid was built at a very, very, very extreme angle. It's a 52-degree angle. Not exactly 52 degrees. I believe it's 51 degrees and 18 minutes is the actual angle. Of course, at different points it has different angles, but that's the mean angle of the Great Pyramid. This is a very steep angle, very, very difficult. Today, with our technology, we cannot duplicate the Great Pyramid, even in a small model. Efforts to build, to replicate the 52-degree angle of the Great Pyramid with our technology in a 30-foot pyramid has failed. We just can't do it. But the pyramid in China, which was photographed by the pilot in World War II, apparently has the same 52-degree angle as the Great Pyramid in Egypt, but is much larger, which means that we now know of 2. They're the only 2 that exist in the world because of the difficulties with building pyramids at that angle. So, so we do have a common point with those, with the 52-degree pyramids in China and Egypt, and then with the step pyramids in Mexico, and the history. Now, I want to point one other thing out, and that is Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible.
Okay.
In the wilderness, after he led the Hebrews out of Egypt.
Hello, I'm Robin Rose. Glad to be with you again. This is the 3rd installment of my weekly segment on the show sponsored by the Feng Shui Center, which I hope you've been following now since my first presentation a couple of weeks ago. The show is Voices in the Wind, as you know, and each week I'll be discussing topics on health, spirituality, holistic healing, metaphysics, a whole array of interesting and exciting topics that I'm sure are of a passion to you as well as me. Last 2 weeks I talked about meditation, and the following week I talked about developing a spiritual practice on a daily basis. And this is something that I teach regularly in my practice, which is counseling and consulting, and I have some upcoming classes in this soon, and I will tell you about that at the end. I also do intuitive readings and healings, hypnotherapy, and a variety of mind-body modalities with a spiritual orientation to really get quick results and to get at the core issues on any level of your being. So I will be talking a lot about holistic approaches throughout the weeks to come. So tonight I promised I would talk about kind of an extension of last week's presentation on developing a daily spiritual practice. And this is going to be focused on channeling everyday guidance, which is really an extension of meditating and these spiritual practices, because once you align yourself, then you're in tune to receive intuitive guidance. And I take it a step further in giving people a number of modalities to work with so that they really have a repertoire that they can access through these tools. The class I have coming up will cover 3 basic modalities for accessing intuition. And one you might not think of for intuition, and that's called applied kinesiology or muscle testing. Many of you have probably seen this. It originated with chiropractors. It's where you hold your arm out and somebody presses down on it, asks you questions, or you hold points on your body, ask the body questions. There are a lot of other muscles you can test as well. Well, this is particularly useful when you're wanting to ask the body information directly, or the subconscious mind, and you want to ask questions about your health. You want to test foods you might be sensitive to or allergic to. You want to test your supplements and herbs and remedies. This is, I think, the best technique for doing that, because you're getting a direct connection with the body and the nervous system and the brain. And I will give you a demonstration of this in just a little bit with someone here in the studio. It's very fascinating how it works, and it's a lot of fun. And we'll devote a whole night to this in my class, as well as at the end of it I'll be introducing basic pendulum techniques. Now, many of you probably have seen pendulum techniques where you just hold something on a chain, which is called a pendulum. And this is a form of dowsing, by the way. Dowsing is commonly known as using dowsing rods to find water or natural resources like oil or gold, possibly, if you're lucky enough. But this is also a form of dowsing. Anytime you use an instrument to get information, it's called dowsing. Most people who know how to do this with a pendulum will just program it to do yes, which you see now, it's moving back and forth. And that would be a yes. If you ask a question, that would be a yes or no. And then I've programmed it to be no, going sideways, this way. You can also program a lot of other cues or signals, like maybe. For me is at a certain angle. It's between yes and no. And stop asking this question, or the answer can't be known, or for some reason I shouldn't be doing this, or I can't receive the answer, would go counterclockwise for me. That's the basic approach that most people use. What I teach is very advanced pendulum techniques, using informational charts that have been developed by numerous people around the country. I've attended dowsing seminars of national congregations of masters in the dowsing and metaphysical fields. And I've even presented myself there now that I've developed my own technique that's pretty unique. So I'm really excited about sharing this with people, because I feel that we live in such a complex world and we have so many decisions to make every day that we really need a way to communicate with our high selves and our subconscious mind. The thing that I teach mostly in my class that I'm most excited about is, rather than having 50 different informational charts that would say be a vitamin chart, or a chart of emotions, or a chart of, say you were looking at different options for career. You could make a chart that would be a circular diagram with different lines on it, and you could put all your career options. Well, I have distilled my technique down to one chart, and that is an alphabet chart, if you can see it on there. It has all the numbers of the alphabet, and it has numbers, digits at the bottom, 1 through 9. This is really like a miniature Ouija board, except the Ouija board was developed as a game for kids, which is very dangerous and irresponsible. This is a serious skill that takes a lot of commitment to being clear and very spiritually clean. If you want to get accurate answers and you want to use it wisely. But with practice, anybody can learn to hold the pendulum over this chart or any other chart, ask a question, and have it move to the letters and spell out the word for you or spell out an entire sentence. And so I will just show you my name, if the camera can capture this. It's a little tricky to do this on an angle. So my name is Robin. It would go to the R, and then it would spin around the center again and find the O, and it just keeps going back and forth on the O until I register mentally or verbally O. And then it spins around again and goes to the B, and spins around again, goes to the I, and finally the N. Pretty amazing. Before you take the camera away, I want to give them a close-up of the other side. This is a percentage chart and a yes-no. So we have yes right here, up and down, no this way, and 10 through 100%. This is invaluable. I use it all of the time to get percentages of yes or no about something, or how open your chakras are, how much you have cleared a particular issue, how compatible you are with your mate, how much benefit it would be for you to take this new job or to move to this new location. So the possibilities are endless what you can do with this percentage chart. I rarely ask a yes or no question because the universe doesn't usually think in black and white like we do. So you will receive this chart if you come to my class, and you will learn how to use it, as well as a lot of other charts that you may never even decide to use that much because you have this one, and it's a lot more efficient to do it this way. And you get a lot more of detailed personal information when you can have it spelled out rather than something that has to already show up pre-written on a chart. Of course, that makes sense. The other thing that we'll cover is connecting with your spirit guides, so you can access your intuition through your own high self, your own divine source, or you can also hook up with those beings who are here to help us from other dimensions. That might be angels, that might be ascended masters, those who have lived and gone on and now help us from the other side. It may be people you've known in past lives. There can be many levels and dimensions these beings come from, and it's very important to know where and what their agendas are and how to identify who they are and what their purpose is in coming to you. So this is not something you should try at home alone, kids. This is something that takes practice, and it really takes a teacher. People who have gotten into a lot of trouble by, prematurely opening their psychic channels, or raising their kundalini and then having nervous breakdowns. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to get all ungrounded and be bringing in a lot of weird energies and having some source tell you how to run your life and you're not even sure who it is. There's a great saying that says, just because someone is out of a body doesn't mean they're any wiser than you. Or because they're dead doesn't mean they're enlightened. So bear that in mind if you are doing this kind of work already, that you might want to learn how to perfect it a little more and to have a lot of ways for checking accuracy and keeping yourself protected and grounded. And so no matter what level people are at, they're compatible with this class. We have people who've never done any intuitive work and people who are professionals who want to use it more effectively with their clients. When you connect with your spirit guides, you can communicate with them through meditation, you can communicate with them through the pendulum, and my favorite way really to have an in-depth conversation is through channeled writing. And I just want to read you a little sample of what can come through. And when you really open up to this and you let it flow, you can write pages and pages in a notebook without stopping. And you know that this is not from your rational, logical mind. And it's wonderful stuff. It can guide you on a practical, everyday level, or instruct you on a very deep, profound spiritual level about your evolution as a soul here on the earth. This was something I wrote not too long ago about a new spirit guide, and I'm very discerning. They have to go through a long trial period with me before they're approved, because I'm very scrutinizing and I'm very cautious. So I was asking about this new spirit guide, and I pretty much accepted him in, but I wanted to know now what his strengths were and his expertise and what gifts did he have to bring me. Because all spirit guides have, just like humans, different areas of experience to offer you. So this is what I wrote, and this is what you're capable of doing too if you open up to this method. I am your perfect personification of your inner male. And I'd been working with a Divine Mother kind of spirit guide prior to this primarily, so it was time for me to work with the male energy more. I am the achiever, the creator, the channeler of yang energies to crystallize your visions and dreams into reality. I am mastery of the divine principles made manifest on this physical plane of existence. I am the power source for all your ambitions. And since there is no duality from where I speak, I am also the divine source of the perfect feminine love flowing through you. You can harness all of these energies now, integrate them and utilize them to fulfill your heart's yearnings, of which I know are many. They know many things about us. The embracing of my spirit will also help you to bring in your ideal life mate at the level you have always wanted. Ooh, good fringe benefit. So that's just a short passage. As I said, you can write volumes that can be your own personal conversation with God. Speaking of which, there's a whole series of books called Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. He lives in Oregon, where I've lived for a long time prior to being here. And these books are hugely popular. If you haven't seen them, check it out, because this is how he started. He sat down with a legal pad and he wrote all night, and that was the beginning of his first book. He now has 6 books. And it's a very user-friendly style of channeling, if you will. And it's a lot of fun to read. So I'd like to get Frank out here, and I promised I would show you muscle testing in case you haven't seen that before, so you'll have an idea of what the heck I'm talking about. Okay, so Frank, stand. So I'm not going to ask any questions or get elaborate with this. I just want to show you the basic technique. So Frank holds out his arm. I'm doing a strength test just to see when I say hold, what his resistance is like. This is just a baseline. So hold, Frank. Good. You don't press down very hard. Now I'm going to do a little magic trick. Hold. He is a one tough, strong guy. All right. You don't have to break my arm, Frank. See how big he is next to me? My God. Hold. Now on him, this doesn't work so well. But let me say so. Well, okay, I'll trick him. My name is Frank. Hold.
My name is what, Frank?
Yeah. Just relax a little, not so hard. My name is Joe Blow. Hold. For him, he is so strong. We got to get some wimpy girl out here. What should happen is when you say something that's not true, it should weaken a little. His is just, this is a weak, but on a really clear test, somebody's arm can go completely down, or if you're holding sugar, etc.
Like on the side like this. And
yeah. But anyway, come to my class and you can see that a lot more. Thank you, Frank.
Okay.
Look forward to seeing you next week. And my phone number, so you can get more information about the upcoming classes in July, is 240-9917. The class starts July 31st from 7 to 9 p.m. It's a 4-week series. You can take one or all of them. It's at the Wild Ground Center. I look forward to seeing you next week, and have a great one.